On March 26, 1964, two prominent leaders in the civil rights movement met for the first time in Washington, D.C., both having arrived out of interest for the debate of a bill concerning civil rights. Each a figurehead for huge campaigns and each with specific goals for the country, they led different groups of people in vastly different directions. Malcolm X, a spokesperson for the Nation of Islam and Black Power, and Martin Luther King Jr., a promoter of civil disobedience through the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or the SCLC, led followers on a quest for a better life. However, their visions on the ideal future were far from similar. King envisioned integration, while X desired a separate nation for independent Black Americans. Unique civil rights groups formed due to their separate geographical locations, as well as different ideas on what change should occur and various religious beliefs. The kinds of leaders and groups in the civil rights movement can be loosely categorized as either nonviolent or violent. Violent groups promote the use of physical force to protest, while nonviolent groups do not. Like the SCLC, some groups used nonviolent protest as their means for progress. Other groups, like the Nation of Islam, endorsed violence as a way to evoke change. Some groups focused their efforts on ending segregation, and others tried to improve general aspects of life. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, vehemently supported voting rights, while the Black Panther Party supported radical government restructuring. Nonviolent groups were more successful in achieving their goals, perhaps due to the fact that they were willing to negotiate, and perhaps because their demands were more realistic. Many civil rights groups became active during the time from 1955 to 1968. Prior to the movement, most schools were segregated by race, as were most public facilities, including public transportation, restaurants, and recreational centers. People who thought this treatment was unfair formed groups to make change. Disparity in terms of income and resources between Black and white people was huge during this time, causing other groups to focus their efforts on raising the standard of living for African Americans, both through desegregation and other means. The NAACP, a nonviolent group, focused their reform efforts on the courts. In 1954, the NAACP provided lawyers to the Brown family in the famous Brown v. Board of Education Supreme Court case. This ultimately ruled that segregation of schools denies to Negro children the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment, and therefore declared segregation unconstitutional. This event greatly contributed to desegregation across the country. With the political freedom to desegregate, other groups took the initiative to organize sit-ins and other protests to desegregate not only schools but also public facilities. Without the court ruling making segregation illegal, these groups could not have made further actions to desegregate communities. The SCLC was a nonviolent group which focused their efforts within communities. Martin Luther King Jr., the leader of the before-mentioned, describes in his letter from Birmingham jail how they began a series of workshops on nonviolence and support to nonviolent tension necessary for growth. The first notable protest associated with the soon-to-be SCLC was the Montgomery bus boycott, lasting over a year, with the goal of integrating the bus system. The boycott ended in 1956 when the bus system agreed to desegregate because they could no longer stay in business. This event not only successfully desegregated the Montgomery bus system, but also inspired people elsewhere to protest segregation through other kinds of economic pressure, like sit-ins. Later, the SCLC helped organize sit-ins in correspondence with other groups. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, was yet another nonviolent group and a main proponent of sit-ins throughout the South. They traveled to different schools, mostly colleges, gathering supporters and teaching them the methods of sitting in. Little Rock, Arkansas, was one city that was segregated until 1963, when SNCC came with the goal to integrate the businesses of the town through sit-ins. SNCC organized students to enter white-only restaurants, causing store managers to order them out or shut down the stores. When the stores could no longer afford to remain closed, the shop owners negotiated with SNCC. The stores would open, desegregated, if SNCC would stop demonstrating. Similar patterns occurred in communities throughout the South. SNCC, with the help of the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, was also active with the organizing of freedom rides. One violent action group at the time was the Nation of Islam, led by Malcolm X. In the present day, the Nation of Islam upholds peace and refuses to bear arms. However, as the leader of the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X promoted Black power by any means necessary, including violence. Part of the Nation of Islam's beliefs, and X's, included that white people were devils and that Black people had to unite to help themselves. X's goals included a separate state for African Americans. This goal was unachieved, as there is no such nation in America today. The Black Panther Party was another violent group, though not religiously centered. They believed that Black people should, quote, defend themselves by any means necessary and should be armed, unquote. The party demanded very specific things from the U.S. government in their 10-point plan, including communal land, free health care and education, full employment, and control of institutions for Black people. They supported improvement in the life of African Americans rather than integration with the white community. None of these goals were ever achieved. There is no communal land, no free health care, nor completely free education, and there is no guarantee of employment today. The violent civil rights groups of this time achieved few of their goals. Nonviolent groups, on the other hand, completed many of their goals, whether of desegregating a school or a city, through either economic pressure or political negotiations. It is seen that, in general, nonviolent groups were more successful than violent groups and certainly contributed more to desegregation. It is important to note the successes and failures of the past and realize that the way to incite change in the future is not to threaten citizens with guns and bombs and harsh words, but to persistently show that change needs to be made through nonviolent actions and to negotiate when the time comes.